Welcome to Voice of the Vatican. Our top stories. Spring blossoms. The beautiful 35,000 flowers that you saw decorating St. Peter's Square for the Easter Mass are being repurposed. Fighting for rights. All eyes are on the battle of the Little Sisters of the Poor in the Supreme Court. But why is this case so important for the future of religious freedom? A representative of Priests for Life, one of the plaintiffs, tells us. A place for all. On World Autism Awareness Day, one diocese shows how they have learned to welcome people with autism spectrum disorder into the church community. The gift of sight. A 5-year-old girl who's going blind and deaf had her dream come true when she laid her eyes on Pope Francis this week. And Divine Mercy. A devotion that started through the writings of a simple nun in Poland is remembered this weekend in a big way at the Vatican and around the world. I'm Ashley Nerona in Rome, Italy, and you're watching Voice of the Vatican. After a very busy Holy Week and Easter weekend, the Holy Father had very few official obligations this week, which hopefully gave him enough time to stop and smell the roses. About 4,000 of them, in fact. St. Peter's Square is in full bloom as 35,000 bushes, flowering trees, tulips, hyacinths, and daffodils decorate the outdoor area for the Easter Mass and the days following. The flowers come as an annual gift from growers in the Netherlands, who made white the central color this year in honor of the Year of Mercy. But the fate of the flowers is not to wither in St. Peter's Square, as these flowers will be replanted in the Vatican gardens or distributed to various pontifical colleges and institutions to be planted. The governorate of the Vatican said that this is so that they may continue to bloom in the coming years. The contraceptive mandate under the Affordable Care Act, HHS, says that employers with over 50 workers are obliged to provide contraceptive health care coverage. But where does that leave Catholic business owners whose faith and morals the mandate violates? Take the Little Sisters of the Poor, a community of consecrated sisters who provide free, compassionate care for the elderly poor. That question of whether or not they should be forced by the government to violate their faith is being discussed right now in the highest court in the United States, the Supreme Court. Here the Little Sisters tell us about their fight for survival.
It's hard to understand why the government is doing this. There are 1/3 of Americans in our country that are not covered by this mandate, and there's large corporations such as Visa and Exxon and Pepsi that are fully exempt from the mandate, but yet we are threatened, the government is threatening us with fines of over $70 million a year. So, it's such a privilege. It's a privilege for us to care for the most vulnerable members of our society, serving them, comforting them, just being a loving and healing presence in their everyday lives is just being their little sister every day. It's our joy.
During his trip to the United States, the Holy Father made an unscheduled visit to a residence of the Little Sisters of the Poor in Washington, D.C., showing his support of their brave opposition to the mandate. Before going to court earlier this month, the Little Sisters of the Poor hosted a prayer vigil saying that they were putting their trust completely in God. That vigil was broadcast live only on Shalom World TV. Voice of the Vatican spoke to Geoffrey Strickland, an attorney who's the director of the Priests for Life Rome office. Now, Priests for Life is one of the 5 plaintiffs in the case, and Geoffrey is here to shed some light on the latest updates in the case and help us understand why it's so critical for the future of religious liberty in the United States.
Essentially, the new development entails the court asking for legal briefs from both sides to the case on how this mandate and this accommodation, how it might be implemented in such a way that is, quote unquote, less restrictive on the religious beliefs held, which some have argued is illustrating a little bit of weakness in the government's position, while other observers seem to just say, well, it's just par for the course and the reasoning of the court and coming to its conclusions. For example, with Priests for Life, they've already made a very clear statement that they will not obey the mandate or the accommodation of the mandate, and so we're looking at a very serious conflict of religious freedom and, the government serving the people in a strict and limited way. And really, it's hard to say at this point. I think it's a real time of prayer. It's a real time to reflect upon, what exactly has been the creative and beautiful aspect of democratic government, and what is at the base of this that has allowed these societies to flourish based in comparison on other societies that have not shared those similar values and have repressed religious freedom. So it's a great time to reflect and pray and ask yourself, would you want the government enforcing a mandate like that upon you? And if they can enforce this, what else can they not enforce? Because if today it's this, tomorrow what will it be?
Since 2008, April 2nd has marked World Autism Awareness Day to bring autism awareness organizations together from around the world and to bolster awareness for research, diagnosis, treatment, and to aid those who are looking for help. 2 years ago, Pope Francis held a special audience at the Vatican with autistic youth. He tenderly embraced those with ASD, offering a message of solidarity to people living with the condition, and urged governments and institutions to respond to the needs of people with autism to help break what he called the isolation and, in many cases, also the stigma. The disorders are characterized by varying levels of social impairment and communication difficulties. And one of the many challenges that parents of children with autistic spectrum disorders face is how to integrate their children into the life of the church. Ann Masters from the Archdiocese of Newark, New Jersey, has developed resources for families, and her work is the director of the Office of Pastoral Ministry with Persons with Disabilities. Thank you for being with Voice of the Vatican, Ann. And how did this special ministry to people with autism spectrum disorders begin in your diocese?
Well, how I got involved in this ministry is definitely a meandering path, but the motivation for teaching individuals with autism to attend Mass developed out of reaction to the many conversations I've had with families having difficulty in this area. Sometimes it was because they were afraid the behavior of their son or daughter would distract people at Mass. Sometimes they felt intimidated or shamed by the glares from people in the pew, and sometimes they have been sadly asked to leave or told that they don't belong. As Catholics, participation in Sunday Mass is integral to our identity. So if someone is not able to attend Mass with his or her family, learning how to do it is very important. And I would suggest it's really the beginning of sacrament preparation. Mm-hmm. The sacraments are communal in essence and not meant to be experienced in isolation. So attending Mass is really an important family activity.
Why is this ministry so important to the Christian community?
We take for granted many times the ability to attend Mass and to bring our children to Mass. Families with typically developing children, even if they only rarely attend Mass, their children can fake it when they go a few times a year. Mm-hmm. And not have any issues. Individuals with autism and some other individuals with disabilities, that's not the case. And so we as a church need to be aware of that and not judge and be supportive as we can in the process.
How does a parent begin to teach a child with autism to be a part of the church?
There can be a very simple process. If the child is motivated to learn, they can start by first getting the child comfortable in the empty church, becoming comfortable in the space, using principles of applied behavior analysis to teach very systematically. Where we've come into play in the Archdiocese is if the family is not able to attend Mass together. Mm-hmm. Individuals with autism need to be taught pretty much intentionally by breaking down complex tasks into simpler steps. Mm-hmm. So it applies to life skills and participation in community events such as going to the movies, a restaurant, attending Mass. It's also important to remember that individuals with autism can and do learn. So in teaching to attend Mass, we make use of evidence-based practices, particularly applied behavior analysis, or ABA.
Thank you for being with Voice of the Vatican, Anne. For more resources and information from the Office of Pastoral Ministry with Persons with Disabilities in the Diocese of Newark, go to www.arcan.org/disabilities. It started as a few pages of notes jotted in the diary of a nun in the 1930s in Poland. But even before her death in 1938, her simple devotion to the divine mercy of Jesus took on a life of its own. Her name was Sister Faustina Kowalska, and she was a simple, uneducated Polish nun who God chose as his instrument of mercy to spread this devotion to the world. She began to have visions of Christ, and out of obedience to her spiritual director, wrote a diary of approximately 600 pages, recording the revelations she received. In this Jubilee Year of Mercy, the Diary of St. Faustina is a great resource, reminding us that God's mercy is infinite, and that he waits on us to simply ask for it, since his mercy is boundless. And when we do, he wants us to totally trust that he will bestow it upon us. He also expects us to share that mercy by acting mercifully toward others, recalling Matthew 5:7, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." The Divine Mercy Chaplet is a vessel of mercy that Christ bestowed for the transmission of this devotion. Sister Faustina learned the prayer using a rosary, which repeats the prayer, "For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world."
For the sake of his sorrowful passion,
have mercy on us and on
Voice of the Vatican spoke to Sister Salvatrice of the same order of sisters as St. Faustina, the Congregation of Our Lady of Mercy, to tell us more about this great saint.
She's a very special gift for us, for the whole congregation of the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy, but at the same time, a very special gift for the whole Church and for the contemporary world. When I open her diary, I can find the words of Jesus. One day he said to her, "In the old covenant I sent prophets, wielding thunderbolts to my people. Today I am sending you with my mercy to all humanity. I do not want to punish aching mankind, but I desire to heal it, pressing into my merciful heart." These words echoes very deeply in our hearts, especially at this Jubilee of Mercy, the extraordinary Jubilee. And when we think about all the situation in the world, how much we miss true love, peace, when we think about loud cry for mercy from different corners of the world, we can say that, and we can repeat after John Paul II, that there's nothing more than man needs than divine mercy.
Sister Salvatrice was a speaker at the World Apostolic Congress of Mercy at the Vatican on April 2nd. Both Scripture and tradition have always taught of the constant love and mercy of God, but this 20th century devotion brings it back into focus, helping us to contemplate the words of St. Faustina's diary, entry 699, that through his mercy, all the divine floodgates through which graces flow are opened. Voice of the Vatican visited the official shrine of Divine Mercy in Rome, that is the Church of Santo Spirito, which was gearing up for quite a celebration.
We're getting ready, like every year, beginning on Good Friday with the Novena of Divine Mercy, in order to get ready for the feast. This was established by John Paul II, specifically requested by Jesus in his revelations to Sister Faustina Kowalska, that the Sunday after Easter would be the Feast of Divine Mercy. Actually, this year it takes on a greater meaning, because it is during the Jubilee Year of Mercy. We prepare, most importantly, through the sacrament of penance, and have confessions made as easily available as possible. Thus, in the 3 days that come before the celebration of Divine Mercy, on April 1st, there will be confessions all day in all of the Jubilee churches. On April 2nd, which coincides with the anniversary of the death of John Paul II, there will be a day of catechesis, worship, and confessions, which will conclude with a prayer vigil led by Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square. Following that, continuing all night long, there will be adoration and confessions in this shrine of Divine Mercy. And finally, on April 3rd, the celebration of the Feast of Divine Mercy, pilgrims from all over the world will converge upon Rome for Mass, celebrated by Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square. Then, in this Church of Santo Spirito, in the afternoon at 3 p.m., the solemn hour of mercy will be presided over by Cardinal Agostino Vallini, Vicar of the Holy Father for the Diocese of Rome. Thank you for your interest, and let's help each other to be apostles of divine mercy in this world, where there's so much hardness of heart, so that our hearts of stone may turn into hearts of flesh.
It's hard to imagine anything greater than the opportunity afforded by the Feast of Divine Mercy, where one's soul can be completely wiped clean of sin by the plenary indulgence attached to the feast, decreed by Pope John Paul II in June of 2002. To learn more about it, go to www.divinemercysunday.com. A little girl saw a dream come true this week, even though she may not be able to see for much longer. Little 5-year-old Lizzie Myers from Belleville, Ohio is losing her vision. But before that happens, she had the chance to meet Pope Francis after this week's papal audience. Due to an incurable genetic disease known as Usher syndrome, Lizzie is slowly losing her eyesight and hearing. Her parents created a bucket list of things they wanted their daughter to see before she goes blind, and it includes the Grand Canyon in Niagara Falls. But Lizzie's #1 dream was to set her eyes on the Holy Father. The trip was coordinated by Untitled, an organization based in Italy that supports sick and disabled pilgrims who travel to Lourdes and other Catholic shrines around the world. A tribute to a hero of our times, remembering the late Mother Angelica, an unstoppable woman on a mission from God. Commemorating the 11th anniversary of the passing of Pope St. John Paul II, who put the celebration of Divine Mercy on the liturgical calendar. And she put her best foot forward. We'll take you along to venerate the relic of the foot of St. Mary Magdalene, the first foot to enter the tomb of Jesus Christ after his resurrection.
Jesus is God, Jesus is Lord, Jesus has the victory.
We all have a call to greatness, a desire for it. We want to do something good.
Now is your time. You could change the world, and the world needs changing, so get busy.
Shalom World, God's own channel.
Voice of the Vatican went up close with Alan Holdren, the Rome bureau chief for Catholic News Agency and EWTN News, to discuss the life and legacy of Mother Angelica, the foundress of EWTN, the Eternal Word television network. Here's what he had to say about the legacy that Mother Angelica leaves behind. Alan, the whole world is mourning after the death of Mother Angelica, and she has inspired so many, she has touched so many globally by bringing the faith around the world, of course via satellite even. And I know also for those involved in Catholic media, she's been an incredible inspiration. Will you tell us a little bit about the reaction in Rome after the loss of Mother Angelica?
As you know, Mother Angelica died on Easter Sunday. So the most immediate reaction was just this great blessing that it was that she would die. She suffered for almost 15 years after a stroke. She wasn't able to speak. She was bedridden in these last years. So, I mean, she was 92 years old. She lived a very long life. We all die. And there was really this great sense of peace from the people that we spoke to in Birmingham, Alabama, where the headquarters is, and here in Rome, this great sense of blessing. So people in almost across the board, speaking with Vatican officials and other people around Rome, they said that this was a gift. Benedict XVI also said that she died on Easter Sunday was this great gift. Wow. And people also inevitably said, we'll pray for her, but we expect her to pray for us from heaven as well.
Indeed. Isn't that the truth? Yes. Alan, what has it been like for you working for this organization with the tone that Mother Angelica set from the top down?
Well, one telling detail is when I informed Father Lombardi, the Vatican spokesman, the Pope's spokesman, about the mother's death. He said that she always put faith first. She always put faith and love of God first, and this drove her communications. And this really is what EWTN is about. Is really trusting in providence, which was what she always wanted to do herself, was put herself into Jesus' hands, and always said from the beginning, this is the Lord's work. I'm just carrying it out. I'm just his tool here. And that's what we've always felt, walking in her footsteps and doing her work here in Rome, is that we're really just tools in God's hands. And it's been very evident at times. We've also asked for Mother's prayers at times, and things have inevitably, as things do in Rome, as you know, they work out, and things are often more beautiful for the challenges that we often face.
Alan, would you tell us a little bit about some of your personal memories of Mother? Some of the things that, as in your work as the bureau chief here, that's connected you to her.
Well, you know, people, it's like John Paul II, St. John Paul II, people who met Mother Angelica, they all have a story to tell about how that moment somehow changed their lives.
Yes.
Or they remember it down to the last detail. And one of the quotes that I like from her, and one of the quotes that also drives a little bit of my work here, is, unless you're willing to do the ridiculous, God isn't able to do the miraculous. And we've pushed from the beginning. This office started EWTN News in Rome through Catholic News Agency 6 years ago, and just with me. And now there are 15 of us. And it's just been this constant, it's trusting in providence and just sort of pushing forward, knowing that things are going to work out, and that our mission is what drives us. We want to save souls. It's just moving forward with providence, trusting in God's plan, and praying to saints. We had the Holy Father this morning at the general audience just told us that Mother is in heaven. That's just an incredible thing to think that she's still there interceding for us, and even in a stronger way now. If we can imagine that she's in heaven, obviously, we don't know.
Sure. But that's not the first time that our Holy Father has spoken about Mother Angelica, is it?
Well, I had the opportunity to ask him when we were on the flight to Cuba, on the way to Mexico just a couple of months ago. And I just told him about Mother's situation, that she was very sick and in bed, and she could use some prayers if he had a prayer for her. And he said, yes, I pray for Mother Angelica, and I also ask her to pray for me.
Alan, Mother Angelica suffered for a very long time after her stroke, and it was certainly with an incredible heroism that she did it. Will you tell us a little bit about that suffering and the effect that it's had?
Her life was really full of suffering. Actually, it was a long series of health problems, of personal problems. Her family was very broken. She really is a story of the incredible power of redemptive suffering. She always offered it up. She always said that, God, if this is your will, then let it be. I want to share in your suffering on the cross. And this is also something that really closely unites her story with that of John Paul II.
Yes.
John Paul II, seeing her after an audience in St. Peter's Square, said, Mother Angelica, weak in body, strong in spirit. you imagine this character where she always knew that in her moments of greatest suffering, that those were the greatest moments of growth or importance of her work. These are the moments when EWTN grew, when her community of sisters grew.
Really?
And she got to know that in that relationship with Christ, that in her moments, the greatest moments of suffering, there was always some reason for it.
Yes.
And just this week we've heard a story from one of the priests down in Birmingham, Alabama, who's part of this order that she started, who said that on the Passion Friday, on Good Friday, she suffered all the way up. This is anecdotal, but she suffered at the moment that Christ would have been crucified, around 3 o'clock. She was really suffering, and she was moaning from bed. And then it stopped, and she was in peace through Saturday. And on the day of the resurrection is when she died.
And then we look here at her beautiful smiling face, this lovely photo that's accompanying us. Will you tell us a little bit about it?
She smiled at Pope Francis just today. We took this very photo into the general audience, and this is the one that was held up that we asked our executive producer, Marta Calderon, asked the Holy Father from a short distance, would he please bless the soul of Mother Angelica? Would he pray for her? And he did. He gave his apostolic blessing, and then he pointed up towards the heavens and said, "In el cielo," in heaven. Amazing.
For more insights and anecdotes about the life of Mother Angelica, from Alan Holdren, the Rome Bureau Chief for Catholic News Agency and EWTN News, you can watch the full-length, up-close interview at www.shalomworldtv.org/VOV. The whole world watched as Pope John Paul II bravely suffered through his last days on earth. April 2nd marks the anniversary of the death of a beloved pope and another great saint from Poland. On April 2nd, 2005, at the age of 84, Pope John Paul II passed away at his residence inside of Vatican City. So many hearts were forever moved during his 28-year pontificate, and by the manner in which he heroically accepted suffering until his natural death, resulting from complications from Parkinson's disease. And so more than 3 million people waited in line to say goodbye at St. Peter's Basilica before his funeral on April 8th. In his second encyclical, Dives in Misericordia, Pope John Paul II stressed that divine mercy is the greatest attribute of God and very badly needed in our modern times. It was he who decreed the devotion of the celebration of Divine Mercy Sunday in the liturgical calendar of the Catholic Church. It's always celebrated on the Sunday after Easter. The date of his passing was the vigil of the Feast of Divine Mercy. And John Paul II was canonized together with Pope John XXIII on 27th of April 2014, which again fell on Divine Mercy Sunday. Last week, we shared with you some special relics of the Passion of Christ, which connect the Eternal City to the Holy Land. Now in Eastertide, we take a trip across the Tiber River to the Church of St. John the Baptist of the Florentines to venerate another special relic. It's a relic of the foot of St. Mary Magdalene, encased inside of this elaborate reliquary. The foot of Mary Magdalene would have been the first to step into the empty tomb of Christ after the resurrection. And it's quite a paradox that the honor of being the first to encounter the resurrection was not a prominent leader, not the mother of Christ, or not even one of the apostles, but a woman who was once despised as a great sinner and who is now an icon of true repentance and of radical transformation, of being totally conformed to Christ after receiving his loving act of mercy. All week long, keep up with the latest happenings in Rome on our Twitter feed, @Voice of Vatican. Be sure to like us on Facebook at Voice of the Vatican, and check our social media feeds for breaking news and information about upcoming guests and features. And we want to hear your voice too. Email your questions, stories, and news to vov@shalomworld.org. This is Ashley Nerona wishing you a blessed Divine Mercy Sunday. May God bless you and your family. Ciao for now from the Eternal City. I'll see you next time on Voice of the Vatican, from Rome to your home.